The 2021 MacBook Pro after 3 months, how has it held up? Is it worth the money? Let's talk about it. How's it going, y'all? It has been Aqua, like the color, and yeah, this is my 2021 MacBook Pro 14-inch with M1 Pro processor, 10-core CPU, 16-core GPU. That is such a freaking mouthful. And yeah, I've been using this computer for about 3 months now. The MacBook Pro 14-inch is basically a dream machine. It's kind of the MacBook and the laptop that I've wanted in my head for such a long time when it comes to performance, display quality, all kinds of stuff that we're gonna get into in this video. So if that sounds fun to you, please smash that like button. It really helps me out in the algorithm, and also subscribe below if you're not already. So yeah, let's talk about some of my favorite things about this MacBook Pro, and then also a few things that I think could be improved in this model. So first of all, let's talk about the design, because this MacBook Pro 14-inch is just honestly just a minimalist masterpiece. I really just think it's a beautiful machine. This machine really feels like the design has been pared down to the basics. Like there's really not even almost any branding that this is a MacBook Pro other than this really beautiful kind of embossed MacBook Pro text on the bottom of the machine. But when you open it up, I mean, there's nothing on here that says MacBook Pro here. Like you kind of just know that it's a MacBook Pro, kind of from that ugly notch, which we'll get into in a little bit. In 2021, they introduced a slightly updated keyboard with the black background and the speaker grills over here. And the language looks like a MacBook Pro, but it has definitely been refined over time. And it really feels like Apple has finally taken a lot of the feedback and critique that a lot of us tech people have given them. And design-wise, I think it's a beautiful design. It really feels like something that is made for a more minimalist kind of person that doesn't want a lot of flashy stuff. And not only is it designed really well, but it also feels incredibly sturdy. Like I've thrown this thing in my backpack when I've been traveling and just like closing it up, picking it up, you know, just like the normal kind of day-to-day stuff, opening the screen up, that kind of stuff. It just feels like an incredibly sturdy and beautiful design overall. And the second thing I love about this MacBook Pro is the performance. It is an absolute monster when it comes to editing video, music production, and if you want to check out my music, head over to Apple Music and Spotify and search for Ben Aqua. You'll find all of my stuff there. I highly appreciate all of your support, all of your streams. And yeah, there hasn't really been almost any times when this computer even slowed down. And even when I'm editing like really kind of hardcore 4K video in Final Cut Pro, or I have a multi-layer song that I'm working on in Ableton Live, there's almost no spinny beach balls, there's no slowdowns, and this isn't even the fanciest chip. Like this has the M1 Pro chip, which for me is absolutely almost overkill, to be honest, even compared to my previous machine, which was the MacBook Air M1. Even that computer was basically overkill for a lot of the stuff that I do, but I definitely think that the MacBook Pro with the M1 Pro chip does feel faster than the MacBook Air overall. And one of the things that makes it so fast, besides the blazing fast M1 Pro chip, is this beautiful display which has ProMotion, which basically means it has a variable refresh rate of up to 120 Hertz. So just like moving your cursor around and opening apps and swiping around, the whole thing just feels buttery smooth. I almost never see any jitters or anything weird or slowdowns of any sort really on this MacBook Pro. It's kind of a dream machine in that way. The fans in this have never really spun off except for once. I was exporting a random H.265 kind of trial video export just to see how it would handle it, and the fans actually spun up, but that was the only time I've actually experienced any fan noise on any M1 machine, and that includes the MacBook Air M1, the Mac Mini, the iMac M1. None of the fans on any of these machines have ever gone off. And why I think that's important is because fan noise can sometimes be really distracting. Like all the Intel machines that I had before M1 Macs, the fan noise on those were absolutely ridiculous. It just sounded like a plane was taking off. This machine just basically cuts through everything like a hot knife through butter. And going back to the display, this is really one of the most ridiculously beautiful displays I've ever seen on any machine, or really any device ever. The colors are absolutely vivid on this. The sharpness is amazing for reading text and going through news and that kind of thing. And when I was comparing the MacBook Pro versus the MacBook Air, this MacBook Pro 14-inch just has a much better display. I definitely noticed like richer colors, higher contrast. And then when I'm watching HDR video on this machine, I mean, it just looks just stunning, honestly. display. It really looks more 3D than any Mac that I've ever used. ProMotion also makes this computer just a beautiful experience overall, and has really good viewing angles as well. You can kind of see that it does fade a little bit when you kind of twist it, but when you're looking directly at it, I mean, it's just an absolutely beautiful display. And it's so good that I don't even really want to hook this computer up to a larger monitor, because it's really just going to be inferior compared to this built-in display. And another thing I love about this MacBook Pro is the port selection. So Apple included a MagSafe port. We have 3 USB-C Thunderbolt ports. We have a headphone jack. We have an SD card slot. We have HDMI out. And this is incredibly refreshing, because in some ways it does seem kind of like a throwback to the years of having like a ton of ports on the MacBook. But for me, avoiding dongle life became kind of a priority, because it became kind of annoying on my MacBook Air and my Mac Mini M1 to constantly have a dongle to plug anything into the computer. For example, I use HDMI out a lot into my OLED display, and having this HDMI out on this MacBook Pro 2021 has been awesome to just plug it in there. And yeah, it's just really nice to have all of these ports in here, and I haven't had to resort to dongle life whatsoever on this computer. The only time when I needed some type of adapter was when I was using a USB-A device, like an older USB device, and I needed to plug that into this MacBook Pro, and then I would have to use like a USB-A to USB-C adapter just to get it to work on this machine. But it's really not that big of a deal, and it actually has helped me kind of force myself into upgrading some of my other equipment that almost all uses USB-C. Another thing that has kind of shocked me at how much I use it and how much I love it in this machine is the speakers. Like the built-in speakers on this computer are just really awesome. They have a weird amount of bass that you wouldn't expect from such a thin machine, noticeably better than the MacBook Air M1 and the MacBook Pro M1, the 13-inch version. And yeah, these speakers just kind of sound amazing. Like a lot of times I don't even need to use external speakers or headphones, especially when I'm just watching like a quick YouTube video or just doing some quick monitoring of audio in Final Cut Pro. It really sounds like almost a nice Bluetooth speaker has been somehow crammed into this MacBook Pro. And yeah, the speakers are really good, and also the headphone jack in this computer sounds really good, especially with high-res lossless audio in Apple Music, which I am a huge fan of. I love lossless audio. Usually with most computers, I would have to use an external DAC, a digital to analog converter. But with this computer, the headphone jack just sounds really good, just plugging headphones directly into the headphone jack. So I don't even need to use a DAC most of the time. It has really lush bass, it has really nice midtones, and trebles are super nice and crisp. And this headphone jack has been updated for some higher impedance headphones. So if you have headphones that just are really sensitive and they need a lot of power from your amplifier / DAC, which this has internally in this headphone jack, like you don't even need a DAC to use this computer. Another thing I absolutely love about this computer is the typing experience. Like the keyboard on this computer, like it's the perfect amount of springiness and travel, and the noise is very quiet. Like it's a very pleasant device to type on. I also think that it's kind of a classy design statement for Apple to put a black background on the keyboard. I don't know, it just kind of makes the keyboard look even nicer, makes it feel even more premium. And weirdly, I mean, you can kind of see it in the reflection. I don't see that many fingerprints or anything on this keyboard. Like usually a lot of MacBook Pro and MacBook Air kind of keyboards, they just look like, you know, fingerprint oil city. Like you just see all this stuff, but somehow there's some kind of coating or something going on this keyboard where you really can't see almost any kind of oils and stuff most of the time, unless you're eating a bag of chips or something and then you touch it. But in most cases, I mean, you know, I didn't wipe this keyboard down before I started this video. I mean, this is actually what it looks like without a wipe down or anything. So it looks beautiful. I love typing on it. It's just a beautiful typing experience. So I do love this MacBook Pro, but there are a few things that I think could definitely improve about this machine. And I would say my biggest con of this computer is it's really expensive. Like this model is a slightly souped up version of the M1 Pro, MacBook Pro 14-inch. This one comes in at $24.99 before tax. So you're looking at, you know, $26.50 or something for a really amazing machine, but that is quite expensive. But yeah, for half of the amount of that, you can get a base model MacBook Pro 13-inch, which for most people is going to be plenty of computing power. You could even get a MacBook Air M1 for under $1,000, even down to like $800, $900 refurbished, which has plenty of power, almost the same amount of power as this MacBook Pro. So yeah, this is a beast of a machine, but it is really pricey at $2,500. That said, I do think $2,500 feels about reasonable and not crazy expensive for a computer with this quality of display and the components and the build quality. Like, it feels like $2,500. Another con of this computer is that it is pretty heavy and bulky compared to especially the MacBook Air that I was using. This MacBook Pro is about 3.5 pounds, and you do kind of feel it, honestly. When you're walking around with it or holding it with one hand or something like that, it does have a bit of weight to it. Even this 14-inch model, when I put it in my backpack, it definitely feels like there's like an anvil in my backpack all of a sudden. But just that extra weight, just that extra bulk in terms of the thickness of this machine, it has made a little bit of a difference in terms of, do I want to take this into the kitchen? Do I want to travel with this machine? Should I just take the iPad Pro? But that said, the bulk and the overall size and weight of this machine, considering the amount of tech that's in it, it seems about right. It's not overly heavy, it's not overly bulky, but it definitely feels more bulky than the MacBook Air M1 and even the MacBook Pro M1. The third negative I have about this computer is this notch right here. Honestly, I would rather not have that notch. And it's a little weird that the notch doesn't have Face ID. Like, this has Touch ID over here on the keyboard, but why isn't there Face ID on the notch? And another potential negative of this machine is, weirdly, the battery life is not amazing. Like, it's okay, it gets the job done, but I definitely have to charge this machine every day, at least once, especially if I'm doing really graphically intense stuff like video editing, music editing, that kind of stuff. Weirdly, the MacBook Air M1, which is not quite as powerful as this machine, felt like it had better battery life. And I think even the MacBook Pro 13-inch has better battery life as this as well. But this will definitely get you through a full day of just kind of normal Safari browsing or just watching videos and stuff like that. So overall, after 3 months, I think the MacBook Pro 14-inch is an absolutely beautiful beast of a machine. It has plenty of power. The performance and the efficiency of this processor are incredible. You can easily edit 4K video or make music or do all kinds of graphically intense stuff on this machine. It has the beautiful display, it has decent battery life, this beautiful typing experience. Like, there's not actually a whole lot that I don't love about this machine. I really had to think about it. I love all the extra ports on here. I love that HDMI out and the SD card slot, the beautiful headphone jack. The speakers sound incredible. It is a little bit bulky, battery life could be better, but you know what? This is an amazing machine, and I highly recommend it for anybody that's thinking about getting a very ultra premium MacBook or just Mac experience in general. I will leave links to buy it in the description below. It really helps my channel out. And if you enjoy this content, please smash the like button below and subscribe as well if you're not already. And also add me on social media at B3NAQUA. I hope this video was helpful for you. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. And yeah, have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video.